Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories, where today, my new neighbor is demanding I change my dog's name. I, 36 male, am the owner of a great dog named Charlotte, who's 6. I live in a lower middle-class suburb in an unspecified part of the US. I've lived here for about a year now, and I let Charlotte out to use the bathroom about 5 or 6 times a day. It's always the same routine. I open the back door, Charlotte runs outside to go to the bathroom and patrol the yard, and typically doesn't come back until I poke my head out and call out her name. About a week or two ago, new neighbors moved in across my back alley. I had no intentions of interacting with them whatsoever, except today when I was executing the last step of Charlotte's aforementioned potty protocol. I stuck my head out and called her name, but this time, alongside the familiar sounds of my dog galloping up, was an adult human voice shouting something along the lines of, "Why are you calling my daughter?" At first, I thought it might just be my new neighbors getting into a spat, until a couple of minutes later, I heard pounding on my front door. I opened the door to an angry woman glaring at me. She said something like, "Why are you calling my daughter over?" And I responded, "Your daughter's name is Charlotte?" And she just kept glaring at me. In absence of a response, I followed up with, "Charlotte is my dog's name." And she rolled her eyes at me and said I better change my dog's name because she doesn't want her daughter, who's 2, getting confused and running over to my house. I told her that's not going to happen because not only did my dog have the name first, we have also lived here first. Plus, I don't like strangers making demands of me before even attempting to be polite. She called me stupid and said that a human child obviously has priority over a dog for a name. I shut the door in her face and glared at her through the peephole for a moment before she eventually walked back to her house. Last potty break, I went out with Charlotte and stayed in the yard with her until she was finished, but the neighbor just kept staring at me with her arms crossed and glared at me the entire time. Not the jerk. You're not obligated to rename your dog. Continue with your usual routine. If their daughter were to come over, you just don't answer the door, or you simply tell her to go back home. You can get a restraining order or file a report if that neighbor harasses and threatens you more. Not the jerk. This is one of the dumbest requests I've ever heard. Sorry to say, but these neighbors are going to be trouble. Just don't give in to their temptations to escalate a feud. Carry on with your business and try not to let them get under your skin. Am I the jerk for not following tradition on Thanksgiving? So to start this off, I, 27 female, have been dating my husband, 34 male, since 2018. We got married 3 years into our relationship, 2021, and things have been going extremely well. We've spent 4 years of Thanksgivings at my parents' house, and this was the first time we chose to spend it at his parents' house. When we got there, my mother-in-law, her mother, and both my sister-in-laws were in the kitchen, all helping each other with the food. Me and my husband went in there and talked for a bit. My mother-in-law asked me if I would like to help out. I said, "Not right now. Would it be okay if I come back soon and help out a bit?" She very nicely said it was totally fine and told me and my husband to get us something to drink and hang out with the men and the kids. My husband gave me a nasty look and said, "You're not even going to help?" His mother said that they were more than enough people and she just asked me in case I wanted to help with the cooking, but that they all managed just fine. He grabbed a beer for only himself and went into the living room. I did the same and followed after. I ended up helping them with setting everything up on the tables as I wanted to help out just a bit. His mother did not ask me to do this, neither did my sister-in-laws. Dinner went extremely well, we talked a lot, and I really like his family. When we went back to the car, he started mumbling really angrily at me. I asked him about 3 times what he was saying before he blew up at me. He told me that it's their tradition that the women are in the kitchen cooking, that I disrespected his mom in her own house by acting so entitled. We ended up having an argument about this whole thing, and he has not stopped insisting on that his mother in fact is offended by this. I have not talked to her about this. She did not tell me anything about being offended either. But I know his mom is a really nice woman who would never want to say anything bad about someone. So I'm starting to think that maybe I really disrespected her and she just doesn't have the heart to tell me. So am I the jerk for not following their traditions? I feel like I was the jerk because helping out would not have been that hard, and had I known the outcome, I would have just stayed and helped out. Edit. I don't know if this will help my case, but I'm working as a nurse and had just come off an 18-hour shift and went directly to mother-in-law's house, hence why I was not that keen on helping out with dinner. I could not get the day off. Don't know if that is even relevant or not. It's just my reasoning behind this. Edit 2. I've seen many people thinking this, and I've tried responding to the comments, but I did not completely ignore or disregard the female side of my in-laws. I was sat in the kitchen talking with them for most of the time, but I also went out to make small talk with the other people. Not the jerk. Oh, so now you're supposed to read your husband's mind? He's the jerk and you're not. And what are you supposed to read from his mind? That you're expected to obey outdated stereotypes? He's the jerk and you're not. It doesn't sound like you have kids yet, but if you do, I have a prediction. He will never change the diapers. Not the jerk. First of all, as a host, I would never ever ask a guest to help me. I'm hosting. If they offer, I may take them up on it, but asking a guest to help out, and especially not something quick like, oh, you're going to the living room? Could you take this plate of apps with you? That just feels tacky. And OP didn't even say she wouldn't help at all, just that she didn't want to immediately. Not the jerk. I really hope you don't already have kids with this deadbeat. He sounds like the horrible type of man who would want his sons to play competitive sports and for his daughters to learn how to do things like cooking. Modern science has proven that sports are bad for boys because it makes them more competitive, which can lead to aggression and feelings of superiority. We never allowed our son to play any sports, and instead we taught him that he is not better or stronger than anyone. Instead of superhero shows, I encouraged him to watch My Little Pony because it's not violent like the Marvel shows. We are also making sure that our daughter does not learn how to cook, because when she grows up, we don't want her to attract the outdated type of man who expects her to cook and clean. I'd much rather her marry a man who loves to cook, like my husband. My husband is a great father who knows his place and has never challenged me on how we choose to raise our kids. I'd honestly divorce this guy if I were you. There are still some good men out there like my husband, but they are not easy to find. Would you like to help means put on an apron and get in here. I know that, but if you didn't know that, that's okay. It was up to your husband to tell you right then and there, in front of his mother and sisters, that it was tradition for the women to bond over service to the family. Instead, he waited several hours to have a tantrum like a kid and acts like you embarrassed him. Please see the situation for what it really is. He thought he married a mind reader and is mad that you failed to know what was happening. He's the jerk. You're the jerk to them since it's their tradition. I'm not traditional, but I'd be a little upset if my husband didn't want to lend a helping hand for my uncles at a family gathering, if they had asked him to and he denied. I'd love the idea of helping family with no hesitation if I had nothing better to do. Even if I was tired, I would help and give a few minutes of my time while using up those few minutes to open up about my day or busy schedule and bond at the same time. 2 birds with 1 stone. Then I'd tell them I need a break because of the long shift I had. Better luck next time. Now you know their tradition. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her husband? Please let us know. I'm still confused about that one commenter that said they don't allow her son to play sports. They don't want him to be competitive at all? It's like she thinks life's gonna hand you everything you need and you're not gonna have to compete for anything in life. Well, to be fair, that's how a lot of the Reddit people think the world should work. Am I the jerk for divorcing during my husband's mental health crisis? Me, 38 female, and my husband, 38 male, married in 2009, and we have a daughter who's 11. Last 3 years have been really tough on us because of my husband's bad working conditions that started to affect his mental health. I noticed signs of burnout and depression and brought up these concerns regularly to him. He was very dismissive and refused to see a situation and refused therapy. He started becoming distant and often isolated himself and was regularly butting heads with our daughter. He eventually told me that he had met a woman at work. Their relationship was not, according to him, physical, but he was in love with her and felt that she was his soulmate and best friend. He said he was very sorry and that he could not decide which woman he would ultimately be happiest with. He spoke out about this at home whilst I was having the toughest time of my life. I cried alone over my dreams and plans, everything we had together. He also told me that in order to clear his head, he would need to leave the house and spend some time on his own. That coworker had offered him her spare room and he was going to take it. I asked for his help organizing the rest of the school year as I was commuting, and I promised him that as soon as the school year was over, I would look for an apartment closer to my work and me and our daughter will move out and he can have the house to himself for his healing. For his healing? The only healing this bozo needs is a kick in the pants. I found an apartment almost immediately and we moved. He would visit us 1 weekend a month and brought his chaos with him every time. The new home had become a safe haven that we cherished, and he took it over as soon as he appeared, and it felt like I wasn't breathing until he finally left. After 6 months of living like this, I decided I had given things enough time to mend, and they had not. I was still hurt and bitter, and he was still cagey about what was going on and what his ultimate decision really was. I told him I was done living like this and that I wanted a divorce. He absolutely lost it and left me and drove back to our old house in the middle of the night just to get away from me. A week later, he told me that coworker is pregnant and he was angry that I didn't want to even try to fix our marriage. Wait, coworker got pregnant with this bozo? What is wrong with people? Since then, he has gotten increasingly more hostile and accusatory in his communication with me. He blames me for breaking up the marriage and abandoning him during his crisis. He says he was not himself and has no idea why he did the things he did, but that I was the one who left. He claims I was no help when he needed me and that I had clearly mentally abandoned our relationship long before, more than 3 years prior. He tells me I'm cold and calculating and clearly not the person he thought I was. I understand that he's not well. He finally did go to therapy. I explained a lot of his actions with that in mind at first. So, am I the jerk? He claims I have become one, taking his daughter away and leaving. You took your daughter and yourself from an unstable living situation. Sure, maybe it would become stable tomorrow, but you gave it a lot of time. His mental health crisis may mean he's out of his mind, but either he's still responsible for his actions or he's not. If he is, you left him because of his actions. Seems reasonable. If he's not responsible for his actions, then you left him because he's deeply in crisis for an extended period, and you can't continue to live that way or have your daughter live that way. I'm curious and concerned about your daughter's experience of this. Those are the people my heart goes out to the most, your daughter and your husband's new baby. Because everyone else, jerk or not, was some form of a volunteer for this. The kids get no choice but all of the consequences. But I don't think leaving your husband while he's in crisis is unacceptable, especially given the long duration and terrible experience for you of that crisis. Not the jerk. OP. Honestly, it's our daughter I'm mostly worried about in all of this. He clearly has changed a lot, no matter how much his mental health plays into it. He will no longer keep his opinions to himself when our daughter visits him, and honestly, I'm left to pick up the pieces when she comes back and slowly opens up about what her father has been saying during the visit. I'm really trying my best not to ever speak ill of him in front of her, and I basically keep my family in the dark because I don't want them to have an attitude towards him that could reflect on her. He seems to have no such issues as I'm slowly finding out. He chews me up in private conversations, which I can deal with, but he also says stuff like, "After your mother kicked me out, I can't help you anymore," and "All I want is to have our family back," to our daughter, and I feel that that's horribly unfair. He's really wallowing in misery right now, and I do have sympathy for him, but he's burdening his daughter and painting me as an absolute villain. He still hasn't told her about the new baby, and honestly, I'm a little at a loss on what to do about that. Update. The divorce is in process, and I have not seen him in person for some 4 months at this point. He mostly keeps radio silence until it seems he has to unload some hurt on me. I've kept our contact to a minimum, only ever messaging him and things regarding our daughter or requesting him to react to official paperwork or to his electricity bills that I've transferred to him. Due to circumstances in which we started the separation originally, I paid most of his living expenses, mainly since I have a steady job and I get paid double his salary. He's still very much incapacitated by his mental health issues, and I wanted to alleviate some of the practical matters for him. Now that we are pulling everything apart, he has been, maybe purposefully, making this into a very slow and frustrating process. Currently, I still pay for his electricity, and he reimburses those bills for me at the end of each month. Sometimes he needs encouraging. Usually this leads to him messaging me all day, usually complaining on how I'm now raising our daughter, now that I have made him obsolete, his words, telling me to get a new dad to help with the job as soon as possible. He seems to try very hard to push my buttons by saying things like, "It must be very hard for you to send your daughter to someone who you loathe and hate so much." And if I make the mistake of losing my temper, even for just one word, he will turn immediately and tells me to calm down, stop spitting acid, and maybe we should continue our discussion when I'm not so wound up. I have mainly chosen to not engage in these conversations if and when they start. I have all of his outbursts in writing. I'm also currently under the impression that the coworker is not interested in a relationship with him anymore. And all of those who asked, yes, the baby is his by his own word. He still has not told our daughter about any of it. I've chosen to give him an ultimatum on the matter. I will bring it up one more time when we have our official meeting with our child welfare officer next month. That's the official route where we live. And if he still refuses, I will take it to myself to tell our daughter the truth. So many of you have encouraged me to do this for her sake and for the sake of our relationship, and I thank you for sharing your experiences with me. I've also contacted her school therapist and the curator and informed them of the issues she's facing now and the ones still to come. I'm hoping they will offer her some scheduled help since I know that she's shy on telling me everything. She is the most important thing in my life, and as sorry as I am for her having to go through this essentially because of my choices, I refuse to take all the blame now, and I'm ready to shift it to where it belongs. Personally, I'm a much happier person these days. I feel bursts of gratefulness and true happiness these days just by watching her eat her dinner and talk to me about her day at school. Even my houseplants are thriving, as silly as it sounds. I finally opened up about all of this to some of my friends and my siblings, and they've all been super supportive. And my siblings were clearly shocked, but both did bring up that they are somehow not surprised at how it went down. They seem to have seen things a bit more clearly from afar, just like this community did. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I feel like my daughter and I are going to be just fine in the end. I actually laughed out loud at the part where he told OP his affair partner was pregnant, but he can't believe OP doesn't want to fix the marriage in the same breath. Like, buddy, do you hear yourself? OP. Honestly, at that point, I had already made up my mind, and when I sat there and listened to his rant, I got the feeling that so much more was to come. When he finally told me about the pregnancy, I nearly laughed out loud myself. It was so absurd that it felt like the whole drama had been turned into a farce, like people would never believe me if I told them this story. And with that reaction, I realized that I was really mentally in a better place, one foot out the door and not ever going back. This was not my crap show to deal with anymore. Stop paying the electricity bill. Stop being sympathetic or empathetic with him. Do not engage. You need to do this for yourself. You owe that to yourself. OP. My friends have also told me to just drop the electricity contract for my plan and have him figure it out. Logically, I know it takes one call for him to make a new contract. He gives me excuses I know are false, but since I also know how passive his mental health issues have made him and how insurmountable small things can become, I find it so difficult to do this and go back on my word. There's also the fear how making our currently bad relationship even worse will inevitably reflect on our daughter and getting through all the legalities. I can't wait until it's all done and dusted. Update 2. I finally separated the rest of our finances, stopped paying his bills, and made official agreements on child support and custody, which remain shared for now as he went back on his word to give it to me uncontested. He did not agree to sign an official visitation agreement because he could not commit to it right now. I offered him every other weekend and half of all holidays. He has started to meet our daughter more often though, since nowadays she actually visits him on her own free will. It seems that their relationship has gotten a bit better lately, which I'm of course happy about. He has been absolutely terrible towards me though. He started a campaign of passive-aggressive texting after I asked him to be civil. Now every message is overly syrupy and filled with overflowing apologies. I ignored this until he decided to talk to me face-to-face when we went to sign the agreements. He told me his therapist told him to talk to me for closure and speak his mind, so he did. He once again just explained to me how hard this last year has been and how I tore the marriage apart, how he was not ready to accept this divorce and never will be, how nothing in his current life is what he wanted or asked for and considers it an insult if I congratulate him over the upcoming baby, etc. This felt really off considering he had just moved in with his affair partner. He originally tried to hide this too and was evasive, but of course our daughter found out the next time she visited and told me. I know it's pointless, but I felt I needed to say something too, so I told him that he completely continues to ignore all my pain and the mental work I had to do over this whole thing, and I can't help the fact that my love died in the process. He says I didn't even try. He said even my parents were more supportive of him because they had exchanged pleasantries having met briefly a few weeks prior. His coworkers were more supportive than me. I told him to look in the mirror and that his little passive-aggressive game was so obvious. Clearly it hit home because he stopped immediately after. He has also been snooping over my dating life through our daughter and is very jealous and gets very verbally aggressive over it. Now the thing that brought me back to you tonight is that despite my life having turned so much better in the last few months and my daughter and I being happier than we have in a long while, I fell into an unexpected hole today. He was supposed to have her over this weekend but ended up canceling. The reason he gave me was different than what he gave our daughter, so I knew he lied to someone. Yesterday, he blew up on me over text that originally started as a discussion over our daughter's visit. He started the same old song of me being so petty over such a minor thing as his affair that was apparently not even a real affair at first. He wrote that my parents were right about me being too sensitive. He knows how low of a blow this is since he's been supporting me through my issues with my parents and validating all of my gripes my whole life with, "You are too sensitive." I told him how low that was and that he does not get to quantify my pain, and he totally lost his marbles to the point where I had to stop reading his messages because I was afraid I would start to cry in the office. This morning, our daughter runs to me, crying happy tears and jumping of joy. Her father had sent her pictures of her newly born little sister. I congratulated the new official older sister, and we gushed over the pictures a little. Throughout the day, my mood has just been awful. I've gotten messages from my family asking how I am, because daughter of course told everyone, which is totally okay, but it's starting to weigh on me. I've been tired and easily irritated. All of a sudden, I felt like I had no one to talk to, no one who would really understand, someone unbiased, an adult to talk to. Those have been my hardest moments in all of this. I lost my best friend when we fell apart, and whenever I feel like I really need to open up and spill my heart, it reminds me of how alone I feel. Is this a normal reaction? I've been fine and very emotionally cut off from him for so long, and somehow the birth of this baby sent me into a sudden nosedive today. I felt like I needed to tell all of this at my lowest point in a long while. So, thank you for reading. This mental health crisis sounds like an awfully convenient excuse for a lot of bad choices. This poor woman, I hope she can find her peace. Am I the jerk for kicking my husband out of the house for repeatedly arguing in front of my family? Background: my husband and I are both argumentative people who have sort of tough personalities. I'm a lawyer and he's retired military. We argue frequently about facts or politics, but these are usually good-natured and humorous. But I try not to do this if we're socializing or at family events, since no one wants to watch another couple argue. Almost a year ago, we hosted two of my older relatives at our house for a few days. All was well until the topic of social media came up at dinner. I mentioned something about how Twitter was a toxic waste dump, full of hostility. My husband decides this is something to argue about and says that's not true. So we start arguing about it, and he's getting angry. Our guests were clearly becoming uncomfortable and quiet. Eventually, he furiously says, "This conversation is over," gets up and abruptly leaves the room. I'm left in awkward silence and have to apologize to my relatives. After they left, I told him how upset I was, that he made us look like two psychos arguing over something so stupid, and that wasn't a normal way to act with guests. He apologized, said he wouldn't do it again, and admitted to me that Twitter was awful and didn't know why he even argued about it. 6 months later, we were visiting with another relative, and he did the same thing, about the same topic. I don't know how it came up, but he angrily argued until it was awkward and uncomfortable. After that, I was very upset. Once again, he apologized and promised me it wouldn't happen again. About a month ago, he told me on his own accord that he was thinking of deleting Twitter because it's such a cesspool. Then at Thanksgiving, hosted by my cousin yesterday, he does it again. We're sitting at the table having a pleasant conversation, and my brother mentioned that after the initial argument where he stormed out of the room, it had concerned my older relative so much that she had told my family she was concerned for our marriage. So the Twitter topic came up, and once again, he starts arguing about it in a hostile manner, till the table was uncomfortable and quiet. Finally, I said, "Are you seriously going to gaslight me again on this topic? Did you not just tell me you were thinking of quitting Twitter because it's such a toxic waste dump?" And he says, "Not in those exact words." I was furious he did this to me again, and we didn't speak on the ride home or for the rest of the night. Today, he says nothing to me and doesn't bother to acknowledge it or apologize. I feel like I'm married to some big, domineering gorilla that likes to make displays to show he's in charge and make everyone bow down to his foul moods. He doesn't even actually disagree or care about this topic, so I don't know why he does this. Finally, I boil over and tell him I want him to leave the house. 3 strikes and you're out. He just asks, "For how long?" And I said I don't know. He then stormed around angrily, got his stuff, and left. Everyone sucks here, because you feed into him by continuing the argument instead of just telling him you're not going to argue. But he's also crappy because he starts arguments over things that he thinks he should have an opinion about. You both sound insufferable and annoying. Everyone sucks here. He's in the wrong for starting these arguments, but you're in the wrong too for continuing them. One of you needed to accept the other's opinion and back down, yet neither of you did. Your husband seems to be worse though, I'll give you that. Last year, my girlfriend ghosted me. Yesterday, I found out why, and now I feel numb but grateful. At the end of September of 2022, my girlfriend ghosted me. She disappeared and blocked me on her phone and all of her social media accounts. I tried reaching out by email, but no response there. This past year has been melancholy. Every now and then I sent her an email telling her how much I missed her. Yesterday I ran into her sister that she used to live with, and she told me what had happened. Around summer of last year, the sister's deadbeat boyfriend, no job, no money, no ambition, moved in with them, and my girlfriend and the deadbeat started hooking up. Eventually, she stole her sister's boyfriend, and her family disowned her because of it. When she ghosted me, my now ex-girlfriend moved to another town with her new boyfriend where they now live together. Her sister told me that even though they don't talk anymore, the sister still follows my ex on social media. She explained that around March of this year, 2023, my ex placed a personal ad. The sister told me that in the ad, my ex described me, things I do, my career, place in life, ability to support her, as her ideal partner. I asked if my ex broke up with her boyfriend, and the sister told me they are engaged and living together. We hugged, and I wished the sister a happy Thanksgiving. When I got home, I couldn't believe what I heard. As I thought about it, I realized that my ex was, and still is, monkey branching. Most of all, I wondered how she could do that to her own sister. I wondered if she was actually a closet narcissist. While we were together, she suffered from social anxiety, so I constantly reassured her and comforted her. Last night, I did some research about links between social anxiety and narcissism. In my research, I learned about covert narcissism, and my ex fits the symptoms and behaviors exactly. I realized now that I had been dating a covert narcissist. When I step back and think about it, I feel like I dodged a bullet. We talked about getting married, having kids, and raising a family. I can't imagine the train wreck I would have gotten into. I don't have any ill will against my ex, and I wish her the best. I do know that I don't want to see her ever again. I'm grateful that she's no longer in my life. Last night I couldn't sleep. I'm grieving now, but I know I'll be all right. I was married to a covert narcissist. The damage that he did to us was incredible. They literally take you apart and then declare war to ruin you if you leave. She did you a favor. My Karen neighbor demands I let her kids play in my yard even after they graffitied my house. My father bought the house in the 80s and held on to it as different developments sprung up around it. I inherited it 3 years ago and have been living in it since. I have 2 acres, while my surrounding neighbors have maybe half an acre if they're lucky. The house is fairly small, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, so I have a very large front and backyard. I use maybe 1/5 of the backyard as a garden, and the rest is basically an empty field. I've always loved kids, so I was happy to let my neighbor's kids play in the field with the understanding that they would respect the property. Most of the kids are great, very respectful, and understand that this is not their yard. The problem is with my neighbors to the right. They have 5 kids, who are 1, 3, 5, 5, and 7, who generally run around unsupervised. They don't come to my yard to play very often unless the other kids are playing soccer or baseball. The 7-year-old is in charge, as much as a 7-year-old can be, but obviously he can't replace parental supervision. 5 days ago, the kids were playing baseball, and he must have lost track of the 5-year-old at some point, because when I came home from work, I found their names sharpied onto my wall, along with some rude drawings. I found their parents the next day and asked them to pay for the paint I'll need to cover it up. They were very offended, accused me of lying, and said they weren't going to pay. If this had been all, I probably would have let it slide and covered the paint since it would only be like $20. But later that day, one of their 5-year-olds decided it would be funny to throw rocks at my house. There are several dents in the siding where the rocks hit, and 2 of my windows are broken. From what I've been quoted to fix, it's about $800 to $900 worth of damage. I talked to the parents, who accused me of doing it myself to make their kids look bad. I've decided those 5 are not allowed to use my yard until the damage is paid for, which I think is more than fair. When they came by this morning to play soccer with the other kids, I politely explained the situation and said they would have to leave as they aren't allowed to play here anymore. The 7-year-old was very upset, more sad than a temper tantrum, which is understandable, but the 5-year-olds were both very angry. About an hour later, their mom came by and went off on me, yelling at my doorstep about how I'm a horrible person who can't stand kids because I'm bitter and can't find a husband. I'm standing my ground either way, but a few other parents came by and seemed a little frustrated by my explanation as to why that family is no longer welcome, which is making me question things. Am I the jerk for banning them from playing here? Edit. To answer some common concerns, I will be installing cameras. I dug my dad's old trail cams out of the garage, so I'll put those up either tonight or tomorrow. I am aware of the liability issues with kids playing in my yard. I'm willing to risk it. I don't want to put up a fence. I think they're ugly. The property line is clearly marked. I will not be banning the entire neighborhood unless I absolutely have to. Edit 2. I also have a meeting scheduled with my attorney to discuss the possibility of drawing up a liability waiver for the parents to sign. Forgot to put that in the last edit. They're also usually unsupervised. Typically, there's a parent or two hanging around anyway, and I work from home, so the kids know to knock on my door and ask me to watch them if their parents are busy. I'm also looking into an umbrella policy that would be more likely to cover any injuries that occur. You're the jerk. As a mother of 6 myself, our kids need a place to stay and have fun. You can't expect us to take them to the park every single day. Kids are supposed to run around the neighborhood and get in trouble. That's how I grew up, and believe it or not, I turned out just fine. If you live in a neighborhood with other people, like it or not, you're going to have kids running around. You know, being kids. Trust me, no parents like dealing with the grumpy old neighbor who complains about everything that their kids do. If it were up to people like you, my kids would be stuck inside 24/7, being quiet as a mouse. I've had neighbors complain before about just about everything. My kids screaming, leaving trash in their yards, my dogs barking too much, you name it. I tell them the same thing every time. Don't like having neighbors? How about you move out to the middle of nowhere where you belong, since you're unable to deal with living in an actual neighborhood? My kids have been playing outside all day, and the boomer neighbors are sitting on their deck right now. I already know they're going to be calling the HOA again like they always do. What they don't know is that I'm friends with the head of the HOA, and every time we talk, we laugh about him and his BS. Bottom line, if you can't stand living next door to a family, just go live somewhere rural where we won't have to deal with your complaining. Well, don't you sound like a pleasant neighbor? Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you let them keep playing in your yard or not? Please let us know. I'd get a couple of big, mean, hungry dogs is what I'd do. Ruff. I called the police on my entitled son. For context, I, female 35, have a son that was born when I was married to my first husband. I was young when he was born, and his father was horrible to me. My ex-husband's mom was constantly in our lives, trying to take over and make my son hers. I left my ex when I was in my early 20s, and my ex-mother-in-law ended up taking my son into another state and filing for custody. She went to a state that has grandparents' rights, as ours didn't. I fought her for years and ended up getting remarried to my current spouse, and we had a son together when I was in my mid-20s, a boy who is now 10. I see my oldest son only during the summer and the holidays. I finally got the court case moved to our local court, and the judge says that I was wronged and ordered shared custody and visitation. My ex-mother-in-law made a huge deal that my son needed to stay with her during the week because of school, and the judge went with it so he could finish high school in an environment where he was familiar. My ex-mother-in-law has ruined my son, just like she did her own. She's given him any and everything he's wanted, she's taught him no respect, and kept him very sheltered. She literally jumps on people if they don't give him his way. So in turn, my son is loud, violent, and all around sad to be around. So he came up to visit during Halloween, and he acted awful. My husband's mom lives with us, and she isn't well. She's doing chemo. She's been a big help with my youngest son so that I could help my husband with our business. My youngest is a delight to be around. He's polite, funny, and respectful. We've taught him that you don't expect anything unless you work for it. I went and picked my oldest up, and his attitude started right away because his phone died and the charger I had in the truck didn't fit his phone. He wanted me to get off the interstate and buy him an overpriced one from a truck stop or something. I told him no, I'd get him one when we got into town, and that next time he needs to remember to bring one for the house and for the car. I suggested making a packing list ahead of time. Now my youngest was in the back with his tablet playing quietly, and my oldest realized the tablet was plugged into a car charger. He asked his younger brother for the charger, and I told him it's an Apple charger. It won't work with your Android. My oldest said, "You don't know that. Shut up." Next thing I know, he's forcibly taking the Apple charger and is trying to fit it into his phone. When it didn't work, he threw it into the back seat of the truck. My youngest just plugged his tablet back up without a word, but I told my oldest that his behavior wasn't acceptable. Fast forward to the next day. Older son is still fuming at me because I made him wait, bad-mouthed me to his grandma, etc. I left to go to the office, as did my husband, and my mother-in-law was going to take my youngest son to the treat trail for Halloween. She asked other son if he wanted to go, and he told her to kick rocks. My husband told him not to speak to her like that. I knew trouble was brewing, I just didn't know how bad. Apparently, mother-in-law and younger son went to the treat trail, and older son called mother-in-law to tell her he wanted Hardee's, also known as Carl's Jr. My mother-in-law told him there was food at home and that it would be a while before she could get in. Older son told her that she needed to bring it right now. My mother-in-law told him to either eat what was at the house or wait. He lost it on her and hung up on her. Mother-in-law called me, and I told her not to reward his bad behavior. I told her we had plans to go out later to eat. He could wait. So when mother-in-law gets home, she tries to open the door and her key won't work. Older son comes to the door and tells her that he's angry and doesn't want her in the house, so he locked her out. He told her to wait outside until he either felt like opening the door or until I came home. My mother-in-law told him to open the door ASAP. She called me crying and I went off. I called older son and told him he didn't make the rules in my house. He went by them and that he would be punished if he didn't open the door. He really thought I was playing. I left the office and went home. Cue disaster. I opened the door and older son was there on the other side. Mother-in-law and younger son had been waiting in her car and older son was blocking threshold, saying that he had told mother-in-law to keep outside, that it was her punishment for telling him no. I told him to move now. I tried to push past him and he pushed me back outside, threatening to lock us all out. I went to go inside again and he put his hand in my face and pushed me back out. I told him, that's it, I'm calling the police. He didn't think I was serious, but I did it. I told the dispatcher that my older son was refusing to let me into my own home and had put his hands on me. Older son goes into a rage, and I mean a pure rage. He comes out of the door, screaming and threatening, tries to take my phone, and the lady tells me she'll send someone ASAP. I mean, I had to literally fight him to keep him from breaking my phone. Then he goes after my younger son and starts saying horrible things to him. My mother-in-law locks herself and my younger son in the car as my older son proceeds to kick and punch the car. He even cracked the windows in the window shield. Older son goes after mother-in-law just as my husband pulls up. He's telling mother-in-law this is her fault, that she just needed to do what he said. My husband tries to restrain older son, and older son is screaming that he will have my husband arrested, etc. The police came, and they immediately restrained older son and put him into the back of the van. My husband and I explained the situation, and I told the officer that my ex-mother-in-law had shared custody. So the officer calls ex-mother-in-law and tells her what's happening. He puts her on speaker, and she immediately puts the blame on us, saying we provoked him and we were mistreating him. The officer told her that didn't seem to be the case, as a neighbor had come forward and said she had called 911 also, plus had a security camera that showed the entire thing. Ex-mother-in-law jumps to saying the police here can't do anything with older son as he's a resident of another state, blah blah blah. The cop tells ex-mother-in-law that's not the case, and it seems like older son needs to learn his lesson. The officer hangs up and ex-mother-in-law immediately calls me. I put her on speakerphone. She's not the smartest, yet thinks she is. If I had older son arrested, that I would be a bad mom and that he was justified in what he had said and done. I asked her about the true son thing, and she said he was my only heir, as he was my first son, and from my first marriage, and divorce is a sin. I told her that's not how it works. I told her I'm tired of him taking my home over and trying to hurt others. Long story short, he spent 3 days in jail before a hearing, and the judge asked me what I wanted to do. So older son is being sent to a group home. My ex-mother-in-law fought the entire way, but had no hold because both officers and my neighbor gave statements. Now ex-mother-in-law is saying I'm ruining his life and I'm a bad parent. She's also accusing my husband of mistreating him. Okay, so I've noticed a lot of comments saying I abandoned my son, gave him to his paternal grandma, etc. That's not the case. I live in a Commonwealth state with no grandparents' rights, and she had 25 plus years of residency in a state that does have them. When I left her son, my ex-husband, she became furious. In her home state, a grandparent has the right to intervene in the child's life during the parent's divorce, and she used that to her advantage. A judge in her home state granted her visitation with my son, even though he was born in my state. During a visit, she filed for custody and was granted it until the divorce was finalized. The divorce took over 2 years due to my ex not wanting to sign papers and being difficult, so older son was almost 10 when it was finalized. I got something called a change of venue accepted, and the custody case was transferred to my local court, where it should have been there the entire time. Of course, ex-mother-in-law wasn't going to willingly hand him over, so she kept filing appeals. continuances, and other things to prolong the case. It eventually went from family court to circuit court, which is also known as high court for that judge to decide. By this time, older son was at the legal age where he could have a voice in court and was established at school in ex-mother-in-law's area. The judge said that he could finish school there and then be transferred up here for school. My ex-husband had signed his parental rights over to his mom, and the judge had to take that into consideration. He did this to avoid the state going after him for support. The local judge ordered ex-mother-in-law to do therapy as well as older son, and there were issues with them not complying. My ex-mother-in-law ruined her own son. He's in his 30s, won't work, doesn't drive, and expects her to keep him up. I did nothing wrong aside from leaving my horrible ex-husband. The recent psych evaluation said older son lacks empathy for others and has delusions of grandeur, meaning he thinks he's better than others. Ex-mother-in-law also had to do a session, and the therapist said ex-mother-in-law is similar in regards and that her expectations aren't realistic. They both have superiority complexes. My ex-mother-in-law used to lock me out of my own home because she wanted to punish me or limit my contact with my own son. When she took him, I did contact local and state police, but they couldn't go into her state without the permission of officials there, and by then she had filed paperwork. She had nothing to use against me, would not abide by court-set visitation, etc. I have 2 homes, a business, and I'm very self-sufficient. My family life is good, not dysfunctional. We've done everything we can to incorporate my son into our family, but he's refused to accept us. I'm sorry I was a crappy mom for not allowing him to lock me out of my own darn house. Holy cow, you did the right thing. Your son is a threat to everyone in your house, and his grandmother is doing him no favors. Get him the help he needs. Don't abandon him, but don't risk your family's safety. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.